Namaskar, Nileshok here. Today we will discuss why Arundhati Vasishta observation is significant. So let's get into the question that I received, and I will walk you through multiple scenarios. All right. So why AV observation, that refers to Arundhati Vasishta observation, is significant? One individual, Neeraj Phadke ji asked this question. He says, if AV observations, well, there are no multiple observations there, it's just one, but so if Arundhati Vasishta observation was there for 4,687 years, that is since 10,248 BCE, he did not write BCE, but that's what he means, then why it was mentioned as significant observation? First, the question is not formulated very well, but he has done a great job of counting the exact number. So where does he get this 4,687? Well, 10,248 minus 5561 BCE. So that gives you 4,687 years. So I have tried to rephrase the question, but not significantly. Okay. So essentially, what he appears to be asking is, since Arundhati was walking ahead of Vasishta right from 10,240 BCE, and of course it continued until 4636 BCE, and the year of Mahabharat war, 5561 BCE, is right within this interval as it should be. In fact, any date outside this interval would be instantaneously falsified by the Arundhati Vasishta observation. That's the big deal about this observation, why this observation is actually significant. But this is a frequently asked questions where people quickly jump into futility, futile objections, or futile thinking. I don't know what motivated Neeraj Phadke to ask this question, but he is not alone. And when the communication is through some YouTube comment, we don't know exactly what else was going on in his mind. But because I get to listen to many asking the same question in slightly modified form, therefore I decided to rephrase it. So typically the question is, well, if the Arundhati is walking ahead of Vasishta all the way from 10,248 BCE through 4636 BCE, what is it that suddenly Vyasa thought of using this in 5561 BCE, in the context of 5561 BCE? Well, the answer is very simple, because some big event like Mahabharat war was happening at that time. In the Indian context, astronomy is time, and so therefore Vyasa is making use of all the available peculiar, useful, ingenious astronomy markers, astronomy indications, astronomy signs, astronomy settings, astronomy configurations to timestamp the event. That's what it is. But people raise futile objections, and I don't mean ordinary folks who may not be Mahabharata researchers. In fact, Mahabharata researchers are so unsettled that they jump into these futile objections at a drop of a hat. But let's take this Neeraj Phadke's question further. He asks why it is considered a significant observation. I already answered the question, but that's not where these people typically indicate, so their question is, why consider AV as a big deal in 5561 BCE, a phenomenon that was already happening for more than 4,000 years. Okay, so that's where that number 4,687 years comes from. Okay, let's try to answer this in multiple ways. Now, do we need to answer this in multiple ways? The answer is no. Actually, we don't even need to answer this. It is there in the Mahabharata, okay, and it helped us determine the timing of Mahabharat war. Specifically, this observation helped us uh, put upper and lower limits for the timing of Mahabharata. And this is so brilliant, this is so amazing in the great wisdom of Vyasadeva that he decided to include this observation. However, this is the answer that Mahabharata dating researchers do not like. Why? We will see that in this video. Okay, let's go through multiple scenarios. Let's look at scenario 1. This is very important, guys. If you want to build scientific acumen, if you want to build logical reasoning skills, if you want to build the principles that are taught in the Nyaya Darshana text, which is to say how to think properly, how to think with the Viveka Buddhi, how to not get into hetva bhasa, a false reasoning, how to not get into futilities, useless, meaningless discussions. Okay, for that this scenario is very important. Again, we start with pancha avaya avayava. If you want to explain something innovative that you have done, and you might have landed on this by chance, you might have landed it by trial and error, you might have landed it in a methodical fashion, it does not matter. You might have seen the answer in a dream, and then when you woke up, you tried to validate and it got perfectly corroborated. It could be anything. That's Swarthanuman, how you convince yourself, how you came across this answer. But when you are trying to explain it to someone else, there is a specific method. Okay, Tasmat Shastra, there is a specific method to madness. It's called Panchavaya Avayava in Nyaya Darshana, thousands and thousands of years ago. And in a very recent time, say last 300, 400, 500 years, since the European Renaissance, the modern science, what we call the logic of scientific method, it is described as a triangulation of explanation, prediction, testing in the context of a theory, in the context of background knowledge. So those are the 5 things. Now against this, the theory is what? Descriptions of Mahabharata text are descriptions of Mahabharata times. Okay, so we look at this AV observation which is given in the Mahabharata, and Vyasadeva is telling Dhritarashtra that day before the Mahabharata war, he is mentioning many different astronomy descriptions, and one of them he says Arundhati is walking ahead of Vasishtha. Now I started studying this in 1994. It took me 15 years to figure this out, and the question was, of course, did actually Arundhati ever walk ahead of Vasishtha? If it did, when did it do? And possibly, if we are lucky, if we can find out what was the cause for such a change in orientation, change in combination, and so on. The answer lies into the basics of astronomy. This actually indeed happened, and it happened because of the phenomenon of the precession of the Earth's axis combined with the proper motions of these stars, the Arundhati and Vasishtha. And what was the outcome? The outcome was that this particular description, the way Vyasa is describing to Dhritarashtra, occurring a day before the Mahabharata war, was possible only during this time interval of about 5,000 years, beginning with 10,248 BCE and ending with 4636 BCE. All right, well, done. The Arundhati Vasishtha was put by Vyasa into the text as a marker, okay, as an astronomy marker, because astronomy is time, and indeed it helped us decide the time interval. So it has done its job. So to answer the question why it is significant, okay, remember this is the tetradic scheme of scientific method. Even why did someone like Neeraj Phadkeji is asking this question? Well, this question is been asked because of the amazing success of Arundhati Vasishtha observation in determining the upper and lower bounds on the timing of Mahabharata. This can be explained by this tetradic schema of scientific method. For example, what was the problem with the Arundhati Vasishtha? Because everyone was considering this to be next to impossible, okay, astronomically not possible. Lokmanya Tilak said that, Shankar Balakrishna Dikshit said that, C.V. Vaidya said that, Bharat Ratna Pava Kane said that. Someone like great Brahmarshi Dr. P.V. Vartak tried to solve this in three different ways and failed every single time. And in an extremely scientific type of spirit, he wrote it down in his book saying, hey, look, I tried this in three different ways. I have not been successful, but I request future astronomers, future Mahabharata researchers to study this further. It was my luck, okay, just a great luck, I would say, that I landed on this observation and never gave up, continued to study this for 15 years and finally succeeded in 2009. So the problem related to Arundhati Vasishta was this: did Arundhati go ahead of Vasishta? First thing, did yes or no? Did it ever happen? And the question is, if it did happen, then when did it happen? Because it has to do with the timing of Mahabharata. Okay. Now, to solve this problem, you have to, TT refers to the tentative theory. Well, what was my tentative theory? I mean, this was, I'm not going to consider this as someone's in his mind, in his imagination, in his dream. But believe me, these are the kind of atrociously nonsensical imagination and explanations given by many Indic researchers. And don't immediately jump and start thinking University of Chicago, University of California, Berkeley, and Harvard. Yes, there are many very agenda-driven Indologists in those places, but there is no dearth of such foolish notions, in India itself, among Indologists in India. That's not a subject today, but actually if you go around and read, you will find that many people, because this observation destroys their claims for the year of Mahabharata war, they have tried to create these useless, meaningless discussions, futile objections by saying things like this, what I just said. Okay, anyways, so what I said is, if I have to objectively show this to be true, then I should able to show it just like anybody else should able to follow the same method and able to reach the same conclusion. In what gauge R&R we call it repeatability, reproducibility, and so on. Okay, so I put forward a tentative hypothesis, tentative theory, that the astronomy descriptions of the Mahabharata text are visual descriptions of Mahabharata times. So I have to show visually why somebody in the year 5561 BC, that is the time of Mahabharata, would see Arundhati walking ahead of Vasishta. Keep in mind, I did not know when Mahabharata war happened. So at that time, I did not know it is going to be 5561 BCE. And that's why that first question, did Arundhati ever go ahead of Vasishta? We don't know that, so we have to figure this out first. And once we figure it out, we have to also know, if yes, then when did exactly it happen? When it stopped going ahead of Vasishta. Why? Because in today's time, Vasishta is walking ahead of Vasishta, and if we go back 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years, still 6,000 years, still Vasishta is walking ahead of Arundhati, which is not the case the way it is described in Mahabharata. And so now the error elimination is what took me 15 years. But finally, when I did eliminate that error, that is when we got this time interval of about 5,000 years, from 10,248 BCE through 4636 BCE. If you pick any year between this, guess what? You are going to see Arundhati walk ahead of Vasishta. That's how we eliminated error. So as long as you stay within that time interval of 5,000 years, Arundhati would walk ahead of Vasishta. There would be no error. The Mahabharata description would match with any of the year that you pick out of those 5,000 years. That is the significance of error elimination. This was grand success, revolutionary success. In fact, this was discovered, whatever you want to call it, finally resolved by me in 2009. And so that's just the beginning of a 21st century. But I am willing to bet that this should be, and we can wait for until the 21st century is over, but this would be the most revolutionary astronomy observations in the history of Indian civilization of 21st century. Now, let me tell you, I want to see such a great progress happening that I would be very happy that this turns out to be just a footnote, because so much other research takes place in the next 75 years of the remaining years of this century, and much more other wonderful research comes forward. Anyways, my point is, we are done. Okay, so we started with the problem, we proposed a tentative hypothesis, we eliminated the error, and we found a wonderful outcome that Mahabharata can happen only after 10,248 BCE and only before 4636 BCE. Any other date outside this interval is instantaneously falsified by this Arundhati Vasishtha observation. This is only for those guys who want to learn scientific acumen, who want to learn scientific thinking, or who already have scientific acumen. Others, you can get to something more manageable for your brain power. Now comes the P2. Anytime you come up with a revolutionary conclusion, make a significant development, the discussion of science doesn't stop there. In fact, it leads to many additional questions of higher complexity. But the important point I want to let you know is that the additional questions is actually an indication of the revolutionary work that has occurred. It is in no way, or our inability to answer P2 is in no way has any effect on what has been achieved. So we have found the time interval for the timing of Mahabharata. That's it, it's done. Nobody can take it away. But this gets misunderstood because people don't understand logic. People do not understand when they quickly jump into Hetva Bhasa, which is fallacies. They don't realize when they jump into futile objections, futilities, which is called Jati in Nyaya Darshana. So let's look at this. So the question is why it is significant. Okay, and so we can raise many questions. For example, why did Vyasa consider AV phenomena significant? Can AV be explained as Nimitta? We'll see what this nonsense is raised by many Mahabharata dating researchers. Is AV outcome robust? Can AV be just a coincidence? Why AV outcome is detested by Mahabharata dating researchers? Okay, and that's why we are doing this episode, guys. Many of the folks like say Neeraj, I forgot his name now, I may be saying it wrong, but Neeraj Phadkeji, they may be simply asking because that's what they heard other Mahabharata dating researchers talking, or it could be their own imagination, again because of this confusion between the fallacies and futilities versus a logically properly drawn inference. So I'm just giving you 5 demonstrative questions. You can make a longer list and ask 10 more questions, but just these are sufficient to explain what we like to explain. So let's look at this scenario number 1. So if we have to answer in one way, what is the significance of this P2, which is to say why it is significant, why did Vyasa thought this as a significant, okay, and so on, for this work that I did between 1994 and 2009, the P1 TTEE, and arriving at a upper and lower bound for the timing of Mahabharata? The answer is none. It doesn't matter why it is significant, or is it even significant, why Vyasa thought of it as a significant. It does not matter. AV observation has done its job. It is there as a part of the Mahabharata text. Vyasa knows astronomy is time. I knew Vyasa astronomy is time. Everybody who studies the basics of Indian civilization knows astronomy is time. Okay, so what is the significance? We can start with none. It doesn't even matter. But let's look at some of the things. P2 exists because of the success of P1 TTEE. If I was not successful in showing Arundhati walked ahead of Vasishtha and a corresponding time interval, guess what? Nobody would be asking this question. In fact, practically 99% of ordinary folks, but listen to this very carefully, even 99% of the existing living Mahabharata dating researchers were even not aware of Arundhati Vasishtha observation until I brought it to people's attention in 2011. Third bullet number 3. P2 has no existence independent of P1 TTEE. If this has not happened, nobody would be asking this question, why Vyasa thought AV to be significant. Okay. Bullet number 4. inability to solve P2 has no effect on the success of P1 TTE. So the time interval, the epoch of Arundhati that I have figured out, does not get affected by our ability or inability to answer the question why AV is significant. Bullet number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Solving P2 leads to growth of knowledge. Now, this depends on, are you turning this question as a doubt of a mind, samshay of a mana, or samshay of a buddhi? If it's a samshay of a mana, in the sense, well, unless you can explain me why this is significant, I cannot accept the conclusion due to AV for the dating of Mahabharata, then there is no fool bigger than you, because this is a doubt of a mind. On the other hand, if you turn this into a question, a doubt of a buddhi, which is to say, this is very interesting, isn't it amazing? I mean, how Vyasa figured it out that he can embed this beautiful observation of Arundhati Vasishta, which will create a unique time stamp, and therefore, no matter when and who looks at the evidence of the Mahabharata text, and if he or she meaningfully does this through scientific acumen and a logical reasoning with appropriate tools, they will every time without exception will land on the correct date of Mahabharata, namely 5561 BCE. So if you turn that into a doubt of a buddhi, it can give you a lot of more information. If you turn this into a doubt of a mind, which is extremely tamasic, then Krishna has a formula for that. Adnyasya ashraddha dhanasya samshayatma vinashyati. Nase jnana nase shraddha samshayi nasala pura. Okay, and the last bullet. The acceptance of P1 TTEE, which is what I did for 15 years, is a prerequisite to discuss or to entertain questions that I listed in P2, or the kind of question Neeraj Phadkeji asked. If you don't accept the outcome of Arundhati Vasishta, there is no point even discussing P2, because the birth of P2 is very much because of the great success of P1 TTEE. Okay, so that's our scenario number 1. This is very important. By the way, I could just simply stop here, guys, and that's fine. Okay, but if we turn this into a doubt of a buddhi, then we can look at 2-3 other scenarios. Let's look at scenario number 2. Okay, so I'm just starting with this tetradic schema. This is grand success, and now the P2 comes in the form of, why did Vyasa consider AV phenomenon significant? Can AV be explained as Nimitta? Let's try to answer this. Now, what is Nimitta? If you ask any other Mahabharata dating researcher, and because this AV observation has instantaneously destroyed their claim, therefore they are unstable, they have become unstable, they are rattled, and therefore they have spent last 15 years just trying to find an excuse why AV observation somehow should not be included. Just like, in a court case, the opposing party lawyer tries his or her best to say why this particular evidence should not be included as a evidence, something like this. And so what do? Remember, they did not even know this was a nimitta. They had no discussion of a nimitta when they actually figured out the date of Mahabharata based on their comprehension of science and logic and evidence. Or many cases, they simply blindly borrowed a claim of someone. So they didn't have to do anything. They didn't read Mahabharata, nothing. Now their whole job was to somehow show why AV cannot be used as a evidence. So they jumped not on the AV verse because they cannot. Okay, the evidence is so powerful, so empirical, so objectively testable that nothing can be done there. So what do? They jump on another word called nimitta. Okay, and so and they say, oh, nimitta means bad omen. Nimitta means omen, like apashakun, and they said, oh, the nimitta, if it's a omen, that means it can be only temporary and it cannot be there for like a 5,000 years. Okay, that is the objection. Very likely Neeraj Phadkeji heard somewhere, listened to somebody, or he has some other favorite Mahabharata dating researcher. I'm not sure. That's how this argument is raised without giving any logical scientific thought to this. Well, omen is one of its many meaning. But let's look at some of the meanings of nimitta. Sake, cause, target, reason, omen, instrumental or efficient cause, ground, motive, indication, sign, good omen, mark. Actually, it's not good omen, it's just a omen, because nimitta can be bad, nimitta can be good, and there will be an appropriate adjective for it. Now let me tell you, just as a demonstration, guys, and you can go and read the whole Mahabharata and find out many other places you see this word nimitta. But what I did is, because some of these lazy Mahabharata dating researchers who have essentially borrowed their claim from somebody else, they have not done any original work, and this Arundhati Vasishta outcome, which is extremely empirical, objectively testable, and has falsified their claims, therefore they are rattled. So they are trying anything that they can. So, for example, some will quote this Bhishma Parva 2.16. Iha yuddhe maharaja bhavishyati mahan kshayah yathemani nimittani bhayayad yopalakshaye. Okay, so I'll not go into the translation, but just focus on the word nimitta there. In this case, it means instrumental, sign, mark, or omen. Next, Bhishma 23:31. This is the first chapter of Bhagavad Gita, and here Arjun is telling Krishna, Nimittani cha pashyami viparitani Keshava, and so on. I will not take time reading the next one. Here he's saying, I'm seeing all kinds of indication, I'm seeing all kinds of sign, I'm seeing all kinds of omen, marks, something is not right, and I don't feel like fighting. Okay, so in that case, he's using the word nimittani. Let's go to the Bhishma Parva 33, which is basically again part of Bhagavad Gita. And here Krishna is telling Arjun, I will read just the last word, Nimitta matram bhava savyasachin. Arjuna, basically whatever needs to be done, the Brahma, okay, the highest power has already done it. You just become a instrumental cause. You just become an efficient cause. Okay, just become nimitta. We use that in our ordinary language. Okay, everything is done. You just become a nimitta. Okay, so nimitta matram bhava savyasachin, instrumental, cause, etc. And just one more from Bhishma Parva, Adhyay 108, and now this one is said by Ashwatthama. Okay, he says nimittani nimittajna sarvato vikshaviryavan. Okay, so he's saying this is on the 10th day of the Mahabharata war, the day Bhishma fell in the battle, and Ashwatthama, right in the morning before Bhishma falling in the battle, he's saying, I see all kinds of signs, guys, here. I'm seeing all kinds of omen. And there, if you just make a summary of these omens, we'll talk about this omen nonsense another time, that there are these nimittas. Some of them are lasting for 5,000 years like Arundhati Vasishta. Some of them are lasting for 1-2 years like Jupiter and Saturn going retrograde, and shining brightly in the vicinity of Vishaka. Samvatsarasthainancho graha prajvalito bubhav Vishakayo samipasto brospati shaneshcharo. For example, the comet near Nakshatra Pushya. If you just keep on watching, staring at the sky, it is there in the vicinity of Pushya, the Halley's comet, for close to 75 years until it comes into apparition and comes close to the earth. Okay, so this nimitta is standing for 75 years. Jupiter and Saturn are there for a year plus or 2 years. Arundhati Vasishta is there for 5,000 years, and what this nimitta that Ashwatthama is describing is going to be there for less than 5-6 days. Okay, there are many things he describes. One thing he describes is the moon rising with its pointed sides down, which is to say the Shukla Paksha. So the 10th day of the war is a Shukla Paksha, a day before Purnima. Okay, just between Amavasya and Purnima, keep that in mind. Okay, day before Purnima. All right, so this is the whole business of nimitta. Now I want to give another quickly description from Jnaneshwari. Very beautiful. Again, this answers that question related to this, something that was happening for 5,000 years, and why did Vyasa consider this as significant? This is, I'm just giving you guys, this could be scenario number 3, but I have included in scenario number 2. You can read this, you can pause the video and you can read it. Okay, and if you don't know Marathi, every reason to pause this and read it. This would be your Marathi 101 introduction. Okay. Uh, Quickly, what Nyaneshwar is saying, this is his commentary on the 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. He's saying uh, the karma, suppose for example, nishkarma versus karma, he's explaining, it is there. You have to do things all the time. Even sitting is like a karma, sleeping is a karma. Okay, not doing anything is also karma. So he says things are going on, just like imagine a wall clock, the old time wall clock. Okay, and nobody's even looking at it, but the clock is running. Now sometime there is a specific activity that you are doing, and therefore you want to go look at the clock, and you say, oh my god, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I got to run to my task. Now what has happened is you're talking about that specific time, although the clock is showing time 24/7, you're looking at that specific time is turning that nitya into nimitta. Okay, take time to read this. Okay, so that also takes away this futile objection of why something that was happening for 5,000 years and why suddenly Vyasa uses it. Vyasa is not doing anything suddenly. In fact, Vyasa is aware that this is happening for 13 plus years. Okay, now because finally the war is going to happen, Vyasa is using this opportunity to use the astronomy markers as well as the markers on the ground to embed them into the text. All right, let's look at scenario number 3. Okay, now suppose we take this definition of a futile definition, a futility, a futile objection of some of the Mahabharata researchers, that if something is a nimitta in the sense of omen, now keep in mind it is their definition, it is their translation, but they are so lazy, so tamasic, they will throw a random translation but not do anything about it. They want somebody else to respond to them. How foolish. If even we take something as a omen and then they have some additional idiocy attached to it, for example, they will say, oh, if it's a omen, well, nobody said it's a omen, you are saying it is omen, but let's go with that. So if it's a omen, it has to be temporary, just like a cat walking in front of you or a asteroid falling from the sky and things of that nature. Let's look at even from that point of view. Now you will only understand this if you look at this doubt as a doubt of a buddhi and not a doubt of a mind. Okay, doubt of a mind will say, well, that's why it cannot happen. Doubt of buddhi, samshaya of a buddhi says, Vyasa used it nevertheless. Vyasa is calling it nimitta. And even if I want to translate that as a omen, let's see why Vyasa would have understood Arundhati Vasishta observation as a temporary observation. Now if you formulate the question in this fashion, you are going to be rewarded. If you understand the deep antiquity of Hindu astronomy, the answer is very easy. I have just put a very conservative number that the tradition of Indian astronomy is very, very deep. Okay, but I'm just saying, just for a simplicity purpose, let's take at least it's 60,000 plus years old. Okay, actually we have markers in Rigveda that takes us to 2,20,000 plus years. Now in this we would see many rotations due to the precession of the Earth's axis of 26,000 years. So how many rotations? About 8 or 9 rotations. Okay, in 60,000 years we are still looking at 2.5 rotations and so on. Now Arundhati ahead of Vasishta during the epoch of Arundhati, which is that time frame I told you, is the first instance of this phenomenon. Now how would Vyasa know it? If you understand the deep antiquity of Hindu astronomy, the tradition that has been passed on from generation to generations through the books, but also through the oral tradition, through the Guru Shishya Parampara, not a surprise. Therefore, actually, a unique time stamp is created by this Arundhati Vasishta as far as the past is concerned. Okay, as far as the past is concerned, this 10,248 BC through 4636 BC is the only unique time interval. Okay, in the last, whatever time you want to take it, 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, 4 million, 5 million, you decide. You don't need to go that far, but if that's your fancy, be my guest. This 5,000 year time interval is the only unique interval when Arundhati walked ahead of Vasishta. Now keep in mind, if you are going back 5 million years, and within that time there is only one instance of 5,000 years when Arundhati walked ahead of Vasishta, guess what? Okay, change your notion of time, that this is indeed a temporary phenomenon. 5,000 years in a 5 million years is a very short period of time, even by this futile objection of this omen, nimitta equal to omen equal to a temporary phenomenon. Okay, it is indeed a significant event, therefore change in the constellation that was watched around the world, because this Ursa Major or Saptarshi is known around the world. Okay, and therefore AV qualifies even as a nimitta as per the reductionist and actually a wrongful, useless, meaningless definition for a temporary change raised, a bogey raised by other Mahabharata researchers, and possibly therefore folks like Neeraj Phadkeji. Okay, let's look at the next scenario, the last scenario. As I said, I could have stopped at scenario number 1, but I want to give you, this is the kind of thinking, guys, that needs to go in. It actually goes into the original research. Therefore, I mention somebody, when they ask a question after my lecture, I say there is no question that is going to be a surprise question to me. And occasionally that does happen, and I recognize and I acknowledge, saying, yeah, this is a wonderful question. I have never heard this before. Let's look at scenario 4. Okay, now the scenario 4 is basically looking at that last question in P2, why AV outcome is detested by Mahabharata dating researchers. And in another way I put it, in a very euphemistic, in a very gentle fashion, that why AV observation is giving mental and intellectual diarrhea to other Mahabharata dating researchers. The answer is very simple, guys. Arundhati Vasishta created this very crisp, very robust time interval, beyond which if anyone proposes a year of Mahabharata war, it is instantaneously falsified. If you understand logic of scientific method, that's what it is. Okay, instantaneously falsified. Not every observation is capable of doing that, guys. Arundhati Vasishta does, and that is giving them this stomach ache, that is giving them the mental diarrhea, the intellectual diarrhea. Now the question may be asked, but hey, come on, this one observation, one verse out of 100,000 verses, can this be just a coincidence? Well, guess what, it is not. And you have to read my whole Bhishma Nirvana book, or just simply go to YouTube, type Bhishma Nirvana Nilesh Oak, and you are going to get easily 20 plus videos. Watch all of them. Okay, quickly just summary, if you look at the Bhishma Nirvana evidence, it creates its own timestamps with a both upper and lower limit, within which only the Mahabharata war is possible. Okay, and so if you summarize these 4 different time intervals based on different sets of data, based on different constraints and different criteria, you end up with a 15 to 1600 time interval between 6722 BCE and 5125 BCE. Is the only time interval where one should look for the year of Mahabharata war, and 5561 BCE, the year of Mahabharata war, falls right between that interval. Okay, it's an extremely robust conclusion based on crucial, critical, empirical, objectively testable evidence. Okay, that's it, guys. So keep this in mind. This is just the last slide. You start with the problem. Okay, this is the doubt clearing machine. This is the Panchavaya Avayava of Nyaya Darshan, or the logic of scientific method. 5 elements to it. Each element must be answered properly, and if you are successful, you get the solution. Now it raises many problems of higher complexity, but those problems, whether we can solve them or not, has no effect whatsoever on the success of the previous round, which is, we can call it P1 TTEE. Okay, with that I am going to stop. Let me get back to this scenario here. Please write your comments, let me know, and you can ask questions. If the question is not worth responding to, I will not respond, but some questions like what Neeraj Phadkeji asked, and Neeraj Phadkeji, thank you for asking that question. Uh, Here is the answer. I say the is the answer. I have given you multiple facets to think how to think about it. In no matter which way you look at it, the answer can be given. But the most important takeaway is that in this tetradic schema of scientific progress, growth of knowledge, the ability or inability to answer the complex questions which arise due to the revolutionary success of the previous round, which is what I call P1TTEE. These new questions has no bearing on the validity of what has already been achieved, namely the epoch of Arundhati. Okay, namaskar.